alihi washabihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Puja dan puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala karena karunia-Nya kita dapat bertemu secara langsung dalam keadaan sehat walafiat. Kepada yang terhormat Bapak Profesor Dr. Tongat SHM Hum selaku Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang, yang kami hormati Ibu Kholidah SHMH selaku Kepala Program Studi Fakultas Hukum Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang, kepada yang kami hormati Bapak Dr. Sascha Hardt selaku pemateri guest lecture pada pagi hari ini, yang kami hormati seluruh Bapak Ibu dosen dan mahasiswa peserta guest lecture yang berbahagia. Selamat datang di acara guest lecture dengan tema Digitalization and Constitutional Change, Challenge and Opportunities for Democratic Legitimacy. Sebelum memasuki acara hari ini, marilah kita buka acara dengan bacaan basmalah bersama-sama. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Pembacaan ayat suci Al-Quran oleh Saudara Abdullah Asim Al-Khotami. Kepada Saudara Abdullah, kami persilahkan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhalladzina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist. Kunu qawwamina bil qisti syuhada'a lillahi walau ala anfusikum. Walau ala anfusikum awil walidaini wal aqrabin. Kun ghaniyan aw faqiran fallahu awla bihima. Fala tattabi'ul hawa ta'dinu. Wa in talmu aw tu'ridu fa innallaha kana bima ta'maluna khabira. فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. صدق الله العظيم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Menyanyikan lagu Indonesia Raya dan lagu Sang Surya. Hadirin dimohon berdiri. Lagu Sang Surya.
Dua menikah, mana yang
Hadirin dipersilahkan duduk kembali. Sambutannya akan disampaikan oleh Bapak Profesor Dr. Tongat SHM selaku Dekan Fakultas Hukum Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang. Dan sambutan dari Bapak Dekan sekaligus akan membuka acara guest lecture pada hari ini. Kepada Bapak Profesor Dr. Tongat SHM kami persilahkan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Dr. Sascha Hardt, my guest from Maastricht University, to all officials within the Faculty of Law, University of Muhammadiyah Malang, and last but not least, to all the proud students of the Faculty of Law. On this very special occasion, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Dr. Sascha for attending the Faculty of Law, University of Muhammadiyah Malang, to provide insight to our students. I hope that his presentation will provide added value to the student. Furthermore, the topic he will be presenting on this occasion is very, very interesting one. Digitalization and constitutional change. We look forward to attending this very interesting guest lecture. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Memasuki acara inti, yakni guest lecture dengan tema Digitalization and Constitutional Change, Challenge and Opportunities for Democratic Legitimacy, yang di dalamnya akan disampaikan pemaparan materi oleh pemateri kita yang sangat luar biasa, yakni Bapak Dr. Sascha Hardt. Dan dalam kegiatan ini nantinya akan dipandu sepenuhnya oleh Ibu Arum Puspitasari SPD MPD selaku moderator kita pada siang hari ini. Untuk itu kepada Ibu Arum kami persilahkan untuk memasuki tempat yang telah disediakan.
Hello, good morning everyone. Can I have you? Oh, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Maybe louder ya. Good morning everyone. Thank you so much. May I know which semester you are from? Semester 1, raise your hand. 5? So hold a second. Students of 2025. Okay. Be patient. Students of 2024, raise your hand. No? 2020, oh, we have some from 2024. 2023? Higher. All of you? Most of you? Okay. So I think your English is already good, yeah? Because we are going to have all English discussions today. So, actually we start earlier. Probably we can have more sessions after this. Dr. Hardt is already in front of us. Hi guys, can I have you be silent please? I'm about to mention today we are going to focus on the guest lecture, Digitalizations and Constitutional Change, Challenges and Opportunities for Democratic Legitimacy. Can I have the students to keep silence a bit? Yes. Okay, very good. And today, now in this building, we have the honorable guest speaker, everyone. Teman-teman nanti please ask ya questions, because this is a very rare chance you have guest lecture situations. So after this, we're going to have the distinguished speaker, Dr. Sascha Hardt, whose expertise in comparative constitutional law and democratic governance. Again, without further ado, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome and join me giving a round of applause to our speaker, Dr. Sascha Hardt. Okay, but before I read the profile, let me remind you back again, we are going to have sessions. Yes, you can have Q&A sessions, but there will be after 1 hour discussions. If you have any questions, raise your hand, save your question ya. There will be door prize. Ada door prize-nya nggak ini? Bu Halidah, skor ya. Well, we can have a negotiations on your score for sure. So silahkan disiapkan ya pertanyaannya. Let me read first the very short biography, because if I read all, it's going to be so long. Dr. Sascha Hardt is Assistant Professor of Constitutional Law at Maastricht University, the Netherlands. He earned his PhD in 2013 with a dissertation on parliamentary immunity across EU member states and the European Parliament. Dr. Hardt research focuses on comparative constitutional law, particularly in interactions between political processes and constitutional development. Dr. Hardt is a fellow Montesquieu Institute and has extensive international teaching experience. Well, he's a lecturer for sure. He served as the adjunct professor at Universitas Airlangga, Indonesia, and has delivered numerous guest lectures. I can say numbers because he just mentioned he traveled to Indonesia twice a year, right, Dr. Hardt? 2 tahun sekali loh to Indonesia. So if you're not comfortable with your English, but I do suggest you to use English, yeah, you can use a bit of bahasa, just a bit. And from 2019 to 2020, he led LEAP, Legal Education's Ethic and Professionalism Project under the Nuvik Orange Knowledge Program, aimed at strengthening legal education at several Indonesians law faculties. Panjang ya teman-teman. I still have long bio, but let me finish the last one. He has authored and edited various academic works, including contributions to legal educations in the 21st century, Indonesian and international perspective, and his expertise includes parliamentary immunity, comparative constitutional studies, and legal educations, as well as professional ethics. Without further ado, Prof, Dr. Hardt, you can start your lecture now? Yes? Okay, guys, please be silent. Now we are going to have Dr. Hardt to distribute the speech. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very kind invitation and for having me here. Thank you very much to all of you for the warm welcome. If you don't mind, I'm going to walk around a little bit while I give my lecture. Before I start, I come from Maastricht University in the Netherlands, and at this university in Maastricht we use what we call the problem-based learning system. It is a teaching approach where we try to be as interactive as possible. So we try to not just be on a podium, lecture to you, you take notes, and later we take an exam. We try to have conversations and have the learning process driven by the students as much as possible. So can I first know, you understand me when I speak in English, right? Okay, wonderful. Before I start, if at any point you think I'm going too fast or I'm going too slow, or there is something that you don't understand, or there is something that you would like to hear more about or have a question, you can interrupt me, right? Just raise your hand. You can have you don't need to wait until the Q&A to do that, okay? It's always good to have a conversation also in the middle of the lecture. So this lecture is titled, yes, after a quote which essentially represents the idea that we can never know the whole picture. We can never know the full reality of things, of people, of the state of the world. Right? For now we see through a glass darkly, through a mirror darkly, but then eventually, and the quote means the afterlife, but I mean something else, I talk about digitalization today, we will eventually know the full truth, the full picture. Now I start with this quote because what I'm claiming is, in this lecture, is that part of the digital revolution, part of the transformation that we're under currently, is that at least for certain actors who have the power and the capacity to utilize these new tools, the darkness of the mirror is being taken away. And it becomes possible, actually, through digital tools, through mass data analysis, through artificial intelligence, not only to see very clearly, but also to react to what we see and to, for example, send personalized political messages, to manipulate public will ever more effectively than before. So therefore the title of the lecture, right? Through a mirror clearly, instead through the mirror darkly. The next, please. Yes. Make it full, please. Yes. So this is on the menu for my lecture. First, I'm going to give you some preliminaries about representative democracy. Indonesia is a system of representative democracy. The countries in the European Union also are representative democracies. So I'm going to walk you through some of the fundamental assumptions of such representative democracy, about the public will, how personal, individual political will translates into politics, into public will, and into legal arrangements. And then I'm going to present to you two laws, if you want, or two rules which have been formulated by the Harvard professor Cass Sunstein. And I'm going to demonstrate how digitalization threatens to violate both of Sunstein's laws for the functioning of, for a healthy functioning of a democratic society. I'm going to talk about technology then, and how technology can be both a force for democracy and a force against democracy. And at the very end, I will invite you to reflect a little bit with me, or discuss a little bit with me, what we can do in order to minimize the threats that come to us through digitalization, artificial intelligence, and so on, and to maximize the benefits. How can we use this to the advantage of society? So that's what I have planned. I've been informed that I have about 45 minutes, so let's see how far we get, right? So, the next one, please. And as I said, if you want to interrupt me at any point, ask a question, you can always do that. Okay, the next, please. Yes. No. Yeah. Okay. So, in a nutshell, representative democracy, like the one that Indonesia has, following its constitution, like the one that most countries in Europe are following also, North America, most democracies in the world really, subscribe either explicitly or implicitly to the idea of right? The idea that power comes from the people, which means, or which translates into the idea that politics should follow the will of the people, right? Those who are in power, our representatives, executive governments, presidents, ministers, etc., but also the lawmakers, parliamentarians, members of the Houses of Parliament, they should all follow the will of the people who elected them. And if they don't, or if they do a poor job, the people will elect somebody else. That's the idea, right? Popular sovereignty, all power emanates from the people. Which also, which also means that state power and state action should be directed and legitimized by the popular will. These are two different things, right? Directed means the will of the people determines what the state is going to do, how the state is going to behave, what laws the state is going to make, what policies ministries are going to implement, which political decisions are going to be taken. And legitimized, on the other hand, means that the state takes a decision, when the state formulates a policy or makes a law, it can do so, or we say as lawyers, it gets legal validity from the fact that the decision makers have been put in their place by the people in elections. So there is a connection between the will of the people and the political life of the state. The constitutions, I just give you a couple of examples. The Indonesian constitution will have a very simple reference here. The constitutions make references to the popular, to the people acting in this capacity of acting out a will, a collective will. Article 20, Section 2 of the German Basic Law, for example, says that Germany is a democratic state and that all power emanates from the people. Article 3 of the French Constitution says something similar. It says national sovereignty belongs to the people. It is exercised through elections and referendums. Okay, so you get the idea. Indonesia has a very similar system. The underlying assumption is that you guys, the people, everybody who votes, everybody who has a voice in this system, co-determines what politics is doing. Okay, next please. Thank you. But it's a little bit trickier than this, right? Because the people is not one entity. We don't have one mind. So we need some process to come from everybody's individual's wishes, dreams, wants, political demands, to this idea of the collective popular will. Because what we see in election results, for example, is not a political decision. So when you on election night, when you turn on the television or the internet and you see, okay, this is the result of the election, you don't see there, is this country going to war or not? Are we going to build a new highway or not? Are we going to invest in solar energy or nuclear power? So you don't see any decisions taken by the people on concrete political questions. You see only how people have voted. So how great a share of the people has voted for what political side. In constitutional narratives, constitutional theory about representative democracy, popular will is not just this idea of what has been called the Volksgeist, the spirit of the people, as Professor von Savigny coined it, and I think this is a word that should be known in Indonesia because Mr. van Vollenhoven brought it into Indonesian legal philosophy. There's even an Indonesian journal called Volksgeist, so it's a well-known concept, right? It's more than that. Actually, the popular will, if we believe it exists, is the composition of all the individuals taking part in the process. Everybody who goes to the polls, every single person who participates in the political life of the country. So democratic processes, elections, referendums, everything, every time you are being asked to give your voice, combine the will of individual persons and cook out of all of these individual persons' voices the collective will. And that then is assumed to express the Volksgeist, what the people want. Now, this means we have a double reading of... Can you go back, please? Can you go one back? Yeah. This means we have a double reading of democratic voting. Democratic voting is actually two things at the same time. It is at the same time the expression of the popular will and the moment of formation of the popular will. Because before voting, before we know election results, we actually don't know what the people as such wants. We only know what every single one of us wants. And then everybody goes to the ballot and we cast our votes and create an election results, and out of that we sort of read what the people wants collectively. So democratic processes are at the same time an expression and a formation of something. Okay, that's very theoretical. Why am I telling you this? It becomes clear when I go on to speak about where technology intervenes and what effect technology is having in this day and age. So the collective will arises only from the combination of both aspects, right? Of the individual will being present and the amalgamation of all the individual wills into the collective will on election day. Okay, let's bear this in mind. There's a double reading of democratic processes. All right, the next one. Good. The fact that we don't know what the people's will actually is before we get at least election results means that there is a little bit of uncertainty. There's always some uncertainty. Because the dual reading of these processes, so the dual reading of individual will and collective will, means a couple of things. It's always abstract. We could also say it's fictitious. It isn't real. We try to interpret the election results as if it were a clear expression of a popular will, but it really isn't, right? It isn't clear at all what the people very concretely wants from its politicians. So it's abstract, and in a sense it's fictitious. It cannot really be known down to the core. It cannot really be known in very much detail. Therefore, politicians will sort of use their election results, the popular support they have, to push their own agenda, to interpret the will of the people in their way. Election results are only coming in at intervals of 4 years, maybe 5 years. So what happens in between, we don't know. What does the people want in between? We don't have a clear picture normally. So these momentous pictures of the collective will that we get every 4 years after elections, they will only be a very sketchy picture of the people's wants, of the people's will. All elections are the only way for individual citizens to know what everybody else concretely wants, right? So how does my political opinion relate to everybody else's? Am I in the majority? Am I in the minority? I can only know every couple of years, I can only know for sure every couple of years on election day. All of these assumptions have been true for the longest time in democracies. Democracies work like this, right? People have elections every couple of years, but in between, politicians just operate. They operate as if they had the support of the people. I'm going to show you that technological developments challenge these basic assumptions. So in other words, these things are not necessarily true anymore with technological developments as we see them today. Next, please. There are two possible forms of distortion of the public will and of the public will formation. So the process by which the people express their will and turn it into the will of the people. First of all, and this was always possible, elections can be manipulated, right? They can be fake ballots. They can be deliberate miscounting. Ballots can disappear. People can cheat on elections. We've heard of that, right? There can also be manipulations of the franchise. For example, in the US nowadays, when the administration is trying to limit voting by mail, that will disenfranchise, so prevent from voting many people who don't have the opportunity to actually go to the ballot station. When the administration is trying to increase voter ID requirements, this will disenfranchise many poor people. Photo ID costs money. When some countries limit the possibility of expats, so citizens who live outside the country, to vote, that of course is a form of manipulation of franchise. For a very long time, women were not allowed to vote in many countries. Actually, the last country to allow female suffrage was when? What do you guess? What year? Among all the countries that do have elections, which was the last country that legalized female suffrage? Any idea? No guess? Now, the last country of the countries that have elections in the first place that allowed women to vote was Bhutan in 2008. The last European country to give franchise to women was Liechtenstein in 1984. I was already alive back then. So these things change over time. They can be manipulated, and elections can be manipulated also. We hear this on the news all the time. But technology does something else. Technology makes it more or less unnecessary to manipulate election processes, because what technology, if we are not careful, allows people, that is political actors, people with money, commercial interests, companies to do, is to distort the individual's own will formation. In other words, it becomes possible to manipulate not how the people express their will, but to manipulate what the individual citizens actually thinks. How does technology do that? Now, first of all, there are some things which are classic, which states have always been engaged in, especially if they were of the authoritarian kind. For example, there can be censorship. Censorship is the idea of limiting access to information. If you don't get if you don't get to know certain things, you don't get to freely choose which information to access, then of course your possibility to form your own opinion gets distorted, gets limited. Or if you are spoon-fed information which the state wants you to have, or which someone else wants you to have, but not other information which contradicts it, that limits your capacity to form your concrete opinion, or it can steer your opinion in certain ways. Indonesia is, I think, number 4 or 5 in the world of countries of social media usage. So only 1, 2, 3 countries in the world use social media more in terms of hours in the day than Indonesia does. So it's extremely, extremely high. Indonesian people are on social media more hours in the day than almost anybody else in the world. But the information you get on social media is not just, random. The information you get and what information you get to see, in which order, for how long, is very clearly determined by the algorithms of the social media platforms that you are using. And therefore, those direct and control those algorithms have a very clear idea of what you get to see. And this is being used, this is being planned. There can be misinformation, wrong information, there can be disinformation, there can be the absence of information. Some things are highlighted so everybody gets to see them, some things are hidden so nobody gets to see them, some things are reinterpreted in certain ways. Also, it can very well happen that the very same event, if you look at news, for example, can be represented and interpreted in one way to you, but in a completely different way to you, based on the information algorithms have about you, about what you like to see, about what you don't like to see, about what you react to, about what you share, about what your interests are. Generally, the artificial intelligence behind these algorithms and also the people behind the commercial users of these algorithms know you very well. Okay. So there can be distortion of the process. That's the old-fashioned thing. Faking elections. That's the clumsy, old-fashioned way. Today, technology allows people of bad intentions to actually manipulate the political will of the people, so you don't need to even manipulate elections. Next one. Now, democracies are not defenseless. We have laws against these kinds of things, right? So democracies typically have legal protections for both kinds of distortions. We have legal protections for both the electoral process itself. So there are electoral laws which govern how the voting takes place, how the secrecy of the voting is guaranteed, how the ballots are being transported, how the ballots are supposed to be counted. We have legal processes if something goes wrong, or if you can make a complaint to the Mahkamah Konstitusi and they can look at it. So there are legal protections. There's also freedom of individual will formation. For example, the Constitution and fundamental rights guarantee to you freedom of assembly, so you can form a political party, you can join a protest if you like, you can have student associations. There is freedom of speech and expression within limits, but for example, freedom of speech and expression means not only that you can say your political opinion freely, but also that you can listen to other people giving their political opinion freely, within limits, because, for example, hate speech is prohibited, extremism, incitement to violence is prohibited, but normally everybody can pretty much say what they want in a liberal democracy. The right to receive information is sometimes even protected separately by the law. So if we look at international law, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19 specifically guarantees the freedom to receive information and not just the freedom of speech. Article 5 of the German Constitution of the Basic Law does the same. Sometimes courts also interpret freedom of speech as including, as a flip side, the freedom to listen or the freedom to receive information. The US Supreme Court, for example, has said that these are two sides of the same coin. So they realize that freedom of speech is worthless without the freedom to receive information freely. So that's all very nice. The law recognizes the possibility to manipulate will formation and inserts legal protections in a way. There are also certain legal barriers to information monopolies. In some countries they are stronger, in some countries they are weaker. In Indonesia they are not very strong. Because the legal protections of media diversity is not very strong, but the more important factor is that in Indonesia, as I said, social media usage is so high, and there's an extreme majority of the population for whom social media these days is either one of very few or even the only source of information they use. So who of you reads a traditional newspaper? Anyone? Is there anyone who still regularly reads a traditional newspaper on paper? Show of hands. Who reads a newspaper? No one. Okay. Who of you watches TV news? Like on television? One. Right. Who of you listens to news on the radio? Like normal radio in the car or so? Nobody at all. Okay, now give me a show of hands. Who of you gets their news from social media channels? TikTok, Facebook, Insta, whatever. Okay. And the people who haven't raised their hand anywhere, don't they get any news at all, or do you just not raise your hand? So we already see social media is the most prevalent source of information. Certainly amongst young people, but in this country, for many, many more people. That's an important fact. Because these antitrust laws, the media licensing laws, the anti-monopoly laws, the subsidies, they only work on the classic media. They only work with regard to TV stations, with regard to radio, with regard to newspapers, with regard to books. They don't work, they don't bite with regard to social media platforms, because social media platforms aren't media operators. They are internet companies, and mostly they sit abroad in different countries. There can also be some legal regulation of political advertising in some countries. So what kind of advertisings can parties and candidates in elections buy? How much airtime does the candidate need to get on state media, etc. But also this doesn't really bite anymore in the age of social media, because on social media advertising can be bought in a different jurisdiction. It is very cheap and it can reach people very effectively. So traditionally, will formation is not a legal vacuum, but because the media landscape is tilting so much towards the social media, it is becoming increasingly a legal vacuum because the social media platforms treat it like one. Next, please. Okay. The proper function of representative democracy is not guaranteed because no laws are being violated. Also, if all the laws are being observed, but not relevant anymore, you can also have a distortion. Okay, let's go a little bit quick. Next one. Now, this is important. There are two basic requirements legal theorist Cass Sunstein has formulated for a democracy to work. There are two things which we all need to have in our society in order to be a functioning democracy. And you can think about to what extent this is still the case in the society you live in. The first requirement is what Sunstein calls serendipitous encounters. Now that's a little bit of a difficult word. It means that at least every now and then, every one of us needs to meet somebody, needs to have contact somebody, needs to have communication with someone, voluntarily or because they have to, who is completely different from ourselves. We need to have contact with somebody and communication with somebody who has a different political opinion, who belongs to a different age group, who belongs to a different religion, who has other views, who has other aims in life, who has other interests, and who belongs to the same society. Because if we only ever stay in our bubble, and we only talk to people who think the same as we do, then we lose the capacity to make compromise with other parts of society. But that's a necessity for democracy. So the regular exposure to other, to people who are different from ourselves, is necessary for people of different kinds, different language groups, different ages, different religions, different backgrounds, to live together peacefully. If everybody just sticks to themselves, you won't have a functioning democracy anymore. That's the first rule. The second rule is there needs to be a shared experience of reality. Now, we can disagree about whether climate change is real. Whether it's real, well, we can disagree about whether we need to cut carbon emissions or build higher dams to better react to it. Or we can disagree, if the economy is going bad, we can have different ideas about what to do. Some people say the government needs to spend more money and hand out subsidies to improve the economy of the country. Some people say the government needs to be austere and save money in order and wait until the economy recovers. But the problem is, the problem occurs not when people disagree about political decisions. The problem occurs when people disagree about reality. So we can have different opinions what to do about climate change. That's no problem for a democracy. But if we get a different idea, if we get to disagree about whether the facts are even the facts, then we get a problem. Because democracies are about finding solutions together. Democracies are about formulating compromises between people who think along different routes. People with different values and opinions, different backgrounds, different faith, different economic situation, different status, different gender, all of these things. Everybody has to work together to find compromises. But if we disagree about even the facts, if I think it's hot outside and somebody else says, no, it's cold outside, matter of perception, but certain things just need to be clear. So if it's 28 degrees outside, somebody can find that hot and somebody can find that cold, but somebody cannot find it 38 degrees. So there needs to be a level of objectivity guaranteed, and then we can have a discussion about what best to do about it. But if objective facts get challenged and people don't believe anymore that the reality is what it is, then we have a problem in a democracy, because then you can't find compromises anymore, because compromises about what? Right? If some people don't even believe that the facts are true, well, what are you going to look for compromises about? So these two prerequisites for a functioning democracy are important. A, you need to have regular exposure to people who are different from yourselves. And B, you need to at least share the same perception of reality, even if you differ radically, fundamentally in political opinion on what to do about these things. It's fine to be fighting in a democracy and to really have arguments in a democracy. That's good even. But not to have a different perception of what is reality. And I'm going to argue that technology these days challenges both of these necessities. Technology takes away our chance encounters to the other, and democracy also takes away our shared experience of reality if we're not very careful. Next one, please. So, I don't want to fearmonger about technology, because it's clear that technological developments have always impacted democracy. You know, when the television was invented, people also went, oh, political advertising on television, this is going to change the world very much. It didn't, ultimately. Same for the invention of the radio, and before even the invention of the telephone and the telegraph. But what's happening since the arrival of social media, and now accelerated by the arrival of artificial intelligence and widespread use of it, is of a different quality, because it reaches everyone, every time, in real time, directly. Next one. So, why is this? Because there are three things coming together that make the digital revolution different from the previous media revolutions. And you can see this, you can test if it's true what I'm saying by looking at your own habits and your own lives. First of all, social media is not becoming a new channel of information, it's becoming the main channel of information. And I already confirmed that this is for most of you. Second, there is mass data analysis. So social media is not one way. The platforms that you are using know everything about you. Trust me, they know everything about you. Because they register in extreme detail, down to the millisecond, how long you watch something, what content you watch, what you like, what you share, with whom you share it, where it gets from, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what you fear, what makes you celebrate, the songs that you like. Social media is better at finding out information about you than sometimes you or your closest friends or your family are. Social media is on the other side of the algorithm, will be able to tell how old you are, where you live, what your ethnicity is, whether you're in love with someone, what your job is, how much income you have, what your political opinion is within seconds. They know enough about you just by following your habits and peddling things to you. And the algorithms know very exactly how you will react to a certain kind of messaging. That's called mass data analysis or big data. And these tools can be sold. So if a political actor has enough resources, enough money to essentially make use of big data analysis, they are able to give you exactly the message that will sway your personal opinion. That's different from making a TV advertisement that everybody gets to see. And third, this process can be sped up and made even more efficient and much more cheap by artificial intelligence. We don't even need human analysts anymore to do this. We can let the machines do the thinking for us. So this is of a very different quality from the previous media revolutions. So what does this all mean for democracies? It can mean two things. It can mean a very positive thing, and it can mean a very negative thing. Because we can also use this to our advantage. For example, social media has also facilitated protest movements, like the Arab Spring. Or think of the protest movements that you had in this very country not too long ago, in August. It's not by coincidence closed down the Twitter, no, not, what was it? The TikTok live feature relatively quickly because they feared for public safety. But the organization of popular movements, which can be seen as a pro-democracy force because it doesn't allow politicians to do whatever they want with impunity anymore, can be seen as a sort of a pro-people's aspect of this. But there's also an anti-people's aspect of this. It allows for surveillance. It allows for political manipulations. So it's very dangerous also. Next one. So let's have a look at the positive aspects first. Whenever a government tries to be authoritarian and tries to shut down the will of the people and become dictatorial, information is the first thing they will attack, right? So censorship, limiting information is the main tool of authoritarian government. But limiting information is extremely difficult in the age of social media. China does it with some success, but only because it's large enough to actually have its own social media world which only operates within China and uses the Chinese rules. But outside of China, which is relatively successful at this, it's hardly possible for any government to really limit consistently people's access to social media platforms in the world. Because social media platforms are cheap to use, are easy to access, everybody can use them, there's very low barriers to publish information on them, and it transcends borders. So typically, if you have access to the internet, you can also access foreign sources. So that's a pro for democracy. It can also be abused for fake news providers. But in principle, it's a pro because limiting your access to information gets harder. Next one. So I'm just showing you some pictures of examples here. The first one is Gezi protest in Turkey. The second one is Arab Spring Tahrir Square in Egypt. The Hong Kong democracy movement, the Belarusian democracy movement, the Edward Snowden, the Panama Papers, and the successful campaign relatively successful campaign that Ukraine is having being attacked by Russia, and the support they are able to generate throughout especially Europe. These are all examples for the very positive forces that a democratized social media landscape can also have. Without social media, Ukraine probably wouldn't exist anymore because Russia would have been successful in shutting down news coming from Ukraine to us. Also, you've seen this in the Israel-Palestine conflict. Israel did its utter best to suppress news coming out of Palestine, but they didn't fully manage to do that, even though the internet was partly gone, because social media is very, very powerful in this. So there are really positive forces in this process as well. Next one. Civil society has benefits from digitalization because members of civil society can inform themselves, organize themselves, agitate on the internet. They can influence politics through online means, and they can counteract the monopolization of information. Next. And they can make the ordinary processes that we have more inclusive, because it all gets easier, political communication gets easier and cheaper. For example, you can make online petitions, it costs you. You can, you can have polls, you can have citizen dialogues, you can have digital party conventions. I could have given this lecture online. Right? It is becoming possible through digitalization, and we have done this during the COVID times, which has accelerated digitalization a great deal. Of course, these things are open the door for abuse as well. So petitions can be abused as a populist tool. Polls and opinion polls in real time are extremely volatile, so they cannot be trusted really. Citizen dialogues. Now, parties and governments try this, but it's often only used by elites. Digital conventions, discussions, etc. can just as well undermine democracy. But in principle, they also bring a lot of power to every single one, because it's accessible and it's true. Next. Just to give you one example, after the financial crisis, Iceland was almost more or less bankrupt. Iceland is a very small country. It doesn't even have 1 million inhabitants, but it is its own country. So they had an idea. They wanted to reform their constitution. But since technology now allows, they crowdsourced the new constitution, or the constitutional reform that they had. So they allowed everybody, every citizen of Iceland, to make suggestions on the internet what to put in the new constitution. And some of their proposals were actually taken on board later. So it makes it extremely accessible to citizens. Next, please. Now, one problem that we have with this is that the more it becomes possible, at least theoretically, for people to participate through online means in democracy, the more they also demand that every single political decision is taken by everyone. So you get these demands for referendums and for direct democracy very, very strong, very, very often. Now, that's not a problem per se. It's not a problem in itself, but many countries actually are under some pressure to develop double structures. Like they have a parliament and government who takes decisions, and then they also get pressure to organize referenda on top of this, which could contradict the decisions of the elected. So it has the potential to undermine institutions. Next one. I'm going a little bit fast now, so we can, yeah. And let's turn to the negative, the anti-democratic force. All of you have indicated that social media is your main source of info. It's also your main way of communication. We know that in Indonesia this has been the case for a long time. You use WhatsApp, Instagram, other social media platforms as your main way of communicating with each other, your main way of getting information, your main way of putting out information in the world. Now, that puts an extreme amount of power in the hands of those who operate the social media platforms, because they can determine what you see. They can determine what ends up in your feed. And those who pay for it can also determine this. So political campaigners who have the means to pay social media platforms to run their campaigns in certain ways, or to pay consultants who know how to operate the algorithms, are able to actually intervene in your serendipitous encounters, your exposure to the political other, so Sun's first norm, by creating a filter bubble. You will only ever get to see content by people who either agree with you anyway or are very much anti, so you get outraged. So you don't get discussion anymore. You either get rage or agreement. You get reinforcement of the opinions that you already have. Also, the general media landscape deteriorates. Newspapers go bankrupt, TV channels have less audience, radio channels have less audience, because social media dominates the landscape. Worst of all, consumers of social media don't get the same facts. So when there was, let's say there was some sort of natural disaster in a faraway part of Indonesia, if you are a believer in climate change and your social media algorithm knows that, it's very likely that you get some sort of news coverage that portrays this natural disaster as a consequence of climate change. If your social media platform knows that you're not a believer in climate change, it will reinforce that narrative by showing you a different story. Same with political communication. You get a lot of targeted, personalized news. Okay, next. Now, during the pandemic, all of this got sped up, accelerated. Because in the pandemic, everybody had to stay home. There was very limited physical contact between people. We didn't have lectures in this room. We couldn't be close to each other. So everybody used the internet and social media even more than before. We even used it for teaching. So we had positive effects of digitalization. But people got very used to literally doing their whole life online. And we saw how fake news can make the rounds and how effective they can be, right? American presidents saying that drinking bleach can cure COVID and things like that. Okay, next one. The thing is, as a legal researcher who deals with populism, I have seen this, and political scientists can also confirm this, that the developments that I have been explaining have a measurable effect. So we can, this is not a theory, it's not a hypothesis. We can measure certain things. We can measure that support for extremist ideas becomes more. Support for hoaxes, like drinking bleach can cure COVID, becomes more in the world. Support for parties that want to limit democracy, turn authoritarian, or turn extremist in any way, gains ground, becomes increasing over compromise, middle ground, less extreme parties and political candidates. The idea that democracy doesn't work, or that people are dissatisfied with democracy as a system, is also increasing throughout the world. It's a global phenomenon. And also civil unrest and instability, so protests, violence in the street, also state-organized violence against protest movement, all of this is on the rise. And all of this has a very measurable dynamic which has to do with increase of, or with the changing habits of communication, including political communication. So these effects are real. Next, yep. We have micro-targeting, so people can be sent different messages according to what they like to see the best. We have commercial exploitation of this. So if I have enough money, I can buy the next election in a smaller country. I don't, but I could. And there's private party influence. So if there's people who are private parties, but who have an interest in who wins the next election, they can donate enough money, not to the party, because that may be prohibited by law, but they can simply use the money to buy political advertising through social media, and that will have the same effect. Next one. Okay. Now, it's very hard to do something about this. It's very hard to just limit the negative effects, because what can we do? We're not going to limit artificial intelligence because it's in the world. We're not going to ban AI, to ban social media because it has been around for a while and a lot of businesses depend on it. And anyway, what would you do? You cannot shut them down. So what can we do? That's the question. What can we do? It's technically difficult and legally difficult. It's legally difficult because none of you are forced to use social media, right? None of you are forced to look at a certain page on Instagram or on X or whatever. It's part, as I said in the beginning, it's part of the right to freedom of speech to also choose your sources freely. So if we were to limit social media usage by law, we would actually be violating fundamental rights as well. So that's very hard to do, and maybe not even very desirable to do. But what else can we do? Next, please. So before I get to the end, let's reflect a little bit on what can be done. I'm going to offer some very preliminary steps. But it is an open question in today's age, and most countries are facing it. Indonesia is facing it as much as my native Germany is facing it, the US is facing it. Every country has to deal with these new realities. So let's see. Next. This is the conclusion of what happens. Before we can talk about policy, this is happening. Digital technology does impact representative democracy in different ways, positive and negative. It undermines Sunstein's requirements. There is near limitless choice, but it still reduces what people see through the filter bubbles. And it does increase extremism. It does decrease confidence in the idea of democracy. Okay, that's the diagnosis. Next, please. Next. I'll skip this. Okay. Now, last, what can we do? How can we regulate technology effectively and without defying democracy's own standards, without limiting fundamental rights in order to save them? Because that's never a good idea. How can we react, give effect to the demand for more immediacy, so demand for more political involvement of the people? And how can we assess the net impact of technology on democracy? Is it positive or negative? These questions are open. I would like to hear your ideas and everybody's ideas, because in every country we get also different ideas. But I offer a couple of thoughts. The first is, let's trace the money. Because even though for the individual user, social media usage is either free or very cheap, for the political actors who use this for their purposes and for the companies who run this as a commercial business, of course this is about large sums of money. Advertising money, users' money. So let's trace the money. Let's trace what politicians, for example, spend on social media campaigns. And let's trace where campaigning money comes from. How to give effect to the demand for new immediacy? Well, let's use these things creatively. Some countries like Iceland have managed to actually give themselves a more inclusive image by making creative use of such tools without falling to the sort of a more abusive side of it. And how to assess the net impact of technology on democracy? Well, that remains to be seen. Personally, I'm not extremely hopeful at the moment because we see many countries in the world taking steps backwards, away from democratizing tendencies, towards more authoritarianism, towards more government oppression. I think Indonesia is one of the countries which are at a crossroads at the moment, but same many countries in Europe, so it is no exception here. So this remains to the future and for you to determine, because you're law students and you're also citizens in a democratic country. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and I look forward to a nice discussion if we have some time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, again, another round of applause. I know some students are making some notes. Hopefully, there's also questions on the notes. So we are moving to the second sessions, which is Q&A. It's not only for the students, Bapak Ibu also, the lecturer. We invite you to give any questions to Dr. Hardt, but let's go with the student first. Anyone? Questions? Okay, yes, please. Mas, can you please stand up? We have the microphone back there. Yes. Mention your name, like also which semester, yeah?
Okay. Good morning, Dr. Sascha.
Good morning.
First, my name is Syahril Fauzan. I'm the third semester students from 2024 A class. And such an honor to talk with you, sir, in this morning. And okay, I'm going to my question. As you mentioned before, sir, in the democracy state, that the public will or the people will must be prioritized in this democracy state, or the public will as a supreme law in the democracy country. And but how if this public will or these people don't have unexpected intelligence to decide? Okay, that is the first one. The second one is it still relevant, the developing countries, to use democracy system? Thank you very much, Dr. Sascha.
Thank you very much for these intelligent questions. So the first question, well, essentially if we assume that in a democracy the public will is paramount, what if the public will is wrong? Or what if the public doesn't take the right decisions because they are not smart enough? Well, democracy allows for that risk, right? Democracy is, so, you know, Winston Churchill once said democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others we have tried. Now, of course, democratic decisions can be bad decisions. So there is nothing intrinsically good about the will of the people. But at least it lends a certain kind of legitimacy, but not the legitimacy, because there can also be legitimacy in a decision being the right one. Now, the problem is that how do we decide whether the people are taking the right decision or wrong decision? For whom is it to measure this? So I would say the chances that democratic majorities take worse decisions rises with the effects that I have been describing. So when people are being, in their own political will formation, manipulated into thinking in certain ways, especially into thinking in extremist ways, of course, those views turn into political majorities. That is utterly dangerous. But to your second question, should we for that reason take away democracy, especially from developing countries which have high social media usage and low media literacy? No, we cannot take away democracy, because that's essentially giving up. And what do we do instead? Who should we give the reins to? Like who should govern for the people if we don't allow the people to govern for themselves? I think that is a viable alternative, because this is exactly what certain people who sort of use these systems to manipulate public will formation would like, right? They would like to have some sort of corporate structures governing instead of, or through the screens of a make-believe democracy. But the real democracy lives through real political dialogue, of information. So I don't think there's a good alternative to that, no.
Okay, Mas, is the answer okay? Yes. Let me open the second questions. Ayo kakak-kakaknya. Okay, yes, please, Mas. Can you please stand up? Okay. Again, name and also which semester?
Yes. Good morning, Mister. I'm so sorry, my English is very bad. Yes. I have little question for you, Mister. How do people perceive the phenomena of electoral democracy, then often does not like with the practice of substantive democracy? Yes, like that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't catch it acoustically.
Once more. Let me help you. Okay?
Yes,
Slower.
I'm refresh.
Repeat, please.
No,
Repeat.
just one question, not.
Let me
Show
see
the
it.
notes. Kasih lihat notesnya. Nah,
Can I see it?
this is the functions of the technology, everyone. Ayo, adik-adik, cewek-cewek, please, one question ya.
Yes,
from
I'm
the
so
class.
sorry, Mister.
Yes. No worries. So,
Give applause first for Masnya.
Thank you. So how do people perceive this idea of democracy, or the perspective of democracy in practice, not aligning with the idea of substantive democracy? Now, substantive democracy means to me that people get what they want. Now, this is apparently not happening, but procedural democracy, people going to elections and so on, is still happening, and there seems to be misalignment. Yes, this has always been the case, and I think the discontent with this is exacerbated by the developments that I have been describing, but it's nothing new, right? Democracy is about compromise. It is about taking different decisions and compromising about them. And it is very normal that not everybody, or basically hardly anybody, exactly what they want out of it. But of course the misalignment may not become too large, may not grow too large, because that leads to systemic disenchantment. So the idea that democracy is not a viable form. So my best answer is, we need to make sure that politicians are still being held to account. That politicians are still being forced to make decisions in the interest of their actual electorate, even though it becomes easier for them to turn the electorate will in other ways than through their political action. We must be very careful. It is a real danger. I agree.
Okay. Okay. Agree. Further questions? No? Further questions? More questions? Yes or no? No more questions? Or yes, more questions? No more questions, okay. Thank you. Well, we do appreciate the courage, right? Language is not a barrier, yeah? Now we have technology. Very good point. Next, Ibu-Ibu. Assalamualaikum. Questions, please, Mbak-Mbak. I saw you make so many notes. Oh, yes, we have one over there. Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Andri Favania. Good morning, Mr. Sascha. I'm sorry
Good
for
morning.
mispronounce it. I want to ask, so in this digital era, what constitutional safeguards are necessary to prevent the technological manipulation of the political will? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the big prize question, of course. Can we design constitutional safeguards against this? I think, honestly, we have relatively limited power to do this on the basis of law alone. So I think one extremely important instrument here is that we need to enhance people's media literacy. So people need to be aware of what is going on. People need to be aware of how their own will formation is being influenced, and that we don't do by creating new legal rules. We create, and by writing new things in constitutions, we do this by educating. I think some legal rules are still necessary. As I said before, one is to be very mindful of money streams. So we should be aware of money exchanges between political actors, technology operators, technology platforms, and also between political actors and the people. So money politics must be limited as best as we can. And then lastly, there need to be some procedural safeguards as good as we can make them. For example, to create algorithmic transparency, to force social media operators to make transparent how their algorithms operate. This is all not enough. So I think legal means are really limited in this regard at present. Some jurisdictions are making a head start. For example, in the European Union, since 2024, we have the AI Act, which is a piece of European Union legislation which really forces, at least with regard to artificial intelligence, the disclosure of information, and it prohibits high-risk activities of artificial intelligence. But I'm not sure if it's enough. So I'm not sure if we actually can solve this through legal means alone.
The question is actually going to be another lecture, yeah. It's quite a big one. Okay, next questions. Ibu-ibu dosen. Nah, bapaknya udah hilang. Oh, now we raise another two questions. Dr. Hardt, you can pick which one, the front one or the back one. Maybe let's go with the front one first, ya. Yeah? Okay, yang di depan dulu ya. Okay. Again, name and which semester?
Okay, good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Yeah. First of all, I will say thank you for the chance. I will say sorry if my grammar is so bad, but I will try my best. This is a simple question, Mr. I will ask about your opinion. In your opinion, from the many of struggle or many of like condition you explained, do you think countries need new constitutional rules to protect digital rights such privacy or maybe data security? What's your opinion, Mr.? Yeah. Thank you.
Well, we see that in those countries which have very strong data protection, and this is not the US, and this is not Indonesia, in fact, the only countries in the world where at least a halfway decent data protection happens is the countries which are under the scope of the GDPR, the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation. There, social media manipulations are still happening, but they are more expensive for the actors, and that makes it less attractive. So I think data protection really helps. It is not the answer to everything, but it really helps. If you give away your data to social media platforms less freely than you do here, or less freely than you do also in Brazil or in India, it becomes harder to operationalize. So I would say, yes, digital protection, data protection tools are extremely important. They are not the only thing that needs to be done, but they are extremely important, yes.
Okay. More questions? No? Concrete? Like, do you need concrete rules?
Like what? Examples. Okay. So, for example, in the countries where the GDPR is applied, it is generally prohibited for websites, including social media platforms, to collect any data without prior explicit consent. So you must always give your consent if your data is collected, and if you press no, then your data is not being saved and not being collected. Of course, many people still click yes, because they want personal advertising and so, but still, this way, the collection rate gets lower, which means the effort it takes the operators to make, for example, personalized advertising and political messaging gets more expensive because it's harder to do. Also, the political commercialization of big data analysis is prohibited in these countries. It's simply prohibited. So if you find money streams going from politicians to social media platforms, that is very often an offense, which doesn't mean they can't still do it, maybe abroad or through back channels, but at least it becomes less explicit, it becomes less direct, and generally the opportunity becomes less. So these are some examples. There are also rules on, like in the new Artificial Intelligence Act, on basically, it's categorizing artificial intelligence based on risk. So there are certain artificial intelligence activities that require a lot of documentation, legal licensing, and so on from the producers and the operators of the AI if it's considered high risk. High risk is, for example, everything that has to do with law enforcement, everything that has to do with hiring people because it can discriminate, everything that has to do with education. For example, I'm not allowed to grade your exams with artificial intelligence. Activities that are low risk are actually encouraged. So the piece of legislation actually tries to categorize this and to disincentivize high-risk activities and incentivize low-risk activities. All of this is not perfect, but it's better than having no regulation at all.
Okay, thank you. We actually have these regulations, Dr. Hardt. But again, our big data was leaked, yeah.
You have some data protection.
So it was leaked here in Indonesia.
Yeah,
so
you have some data protection regulations, but they are much weaker than the
right.
GDPR.
I think we have a very great hacker here in Indonesia, actually. Ya nggak kehack mulu kan. The regulation is there already, but the system probably need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Okay, one more questions probably. I think let's have it like the boy over here, because he raised hand like 3 times already.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Sascha Hardt.
Yes.
I'm gonna make it easier for you. I have a question. I'm asking for your opinion regarding the greater belief of people to the social media as a source of information, rather than any source of information like TV, radio, or everything else, etc. Can it be seen as something good or bad, and does it possess any threat to the governmental system?
Well, you see, traditional media, especially if you have a healthy media landscape with different, different political leanings, and there will be more conservative, more progressive, and more religious, and more secular media outlets. Normally there is a spectrum, right? And people can choose freely. But what traditional media usually has in common is that there is a mediator. There is somebody who already sort of interprets and explains what is being reported to the audience. In social media, that is breaking away. So therefore, social media is much more susceptible to outright fake news, hoaxes, stories that are simply nothing, are not rooted in reality at all. Therefore, I think generally the reliance on social media as the only source of information is not a good development.
Okay. We still have time. So are you okay with more questions? Yes, Mas? Yes, okay.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Dimas Saiful Akbar. I'm from 5th law student in law faculty. The thing that I want to ask is, in my opinion, a good country always in line with a good government. What should we do as a college student to facing up challenges and opportunities for democratic legitimacy? What should we do? The action, and all we talk about before was about the theoretical. Now I want to ask about the action. What should we do? Thank you, sir.
Well, I cannot tell you how to improve your government because I don't know what a good government for you personally is, of course. So I'm not going to give you political advice. But what is happening, what we see happening in many jurisdictions throughout the world is that there are increasing tendencies towards more authoritarian government. And this, I think, is not a good development. So what we should bring back, what we should emphasize, and media reporting, political communication is one aspect of this, only one aspect, is to bring back increased accountability of political actors and office holders. Now, Indonesia is a country which has two faces in this regard, right? Indonesia is a country which has had a remarkable democratic transformation, which many people would not have believed possible without the country breaking apart. So Indonesia is a story of success and hope. Indonesia is also a country whose democratic system has quite a few problems. So you have dynastic politics. The US has that too, so you're certainly not alone in this, right? There is the problem of money politics and corruption. There's also the prospect that courts are not always fully independent and all of these things. So if talking about action, I think what is important is to really see to it that institutions are being strengthened. So strengthen the anti-corruption authority, strengthen all kinds of watchdogs, including media who reports on any kind of abuse by the government. And here actually we see also a positive side of social media, because when we saw the protests in August, for example, much of the reporting, much of the good reporting that really brought some details to light were done actually by citizens reporters, right? By people who run YouTube channels and I don't know what kind of social media platforms. So this can be used as a force for good as well. It is double-edged always. Again, I cannot advise on how to improve the in your country. Also, I'm not a full expert on Indonesian government. I just follow it. But as a global phenomenon, I think strengthening institutions is rather than weakening them, which is what is happening, is the only way that we can preserve democratic systems.
Yeah. Okay. Again, we still have time. Probably let's offer this to the girls first. No? Sis? No questions? No? Boys? Again, I thought I saw someone over there at the back row raising hand previously. The same questions? No? Okay. Probably maybe this one is the questions from me. From the students' research, Dr. Hardt. Ini untuk skripsimu coba ya. Are you preparing for your thesis? Yeah? Okay. Maybe let's talk about, we have, let me check my notes. We have the information flaws, sustains prerequisites as you mentioned, democratic legitimacy. Is there any suggestions? Because they're about to do the research after this, probably next semester. Like the topic that do you think is going to be interesting to be discussed in their thesis. Okay. Ini buat topik risetmu nih. Listen ya. For your thesis, for your skripsi. Yes, please, Dr. Hardt. Any suggestions? Like which area should they explore?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Oh, the question is about the research they can go through, talking about this digital literacy, like digitalizations and also constitutionals, which they can explore in Indonesian context.
Oh, there are plenty. There are plenty of research opportunities there. Now, for thesis topics, you can always look into how institutions operate or fail to operate. You can look into legal structures that regulate technologies. So Indonesia is preparing, for example, they say they're preparing legislation to regulate artificial intelligence. But so far, there are only 2 circular letters by ministries, one for commercial users of AI and one general, and they don't say very much. They say that it must be used ethically, that it must be transparent, but it doesn't. But there are no rules exactly. And so I think a good thesis would be looking into possibilities and necessities of regulating this and how this could be done in Indonesia. I think that's a very relevant and topical issue. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good topic. If you want to explore more on AI, artificial intelligence rules, yes, we barely have any rules now. So probably you can make proposals, right? Or anything related to that things, yeah? Related to digitalizations. Yes? Questions? If there is no more questions, Bu Khalidah, can we close it? Okay. Maybe the closing remarks as the conclusions from Dr. Hardt.
Now, thank you very much once again for having me this morning and for listening to my story. Again, it's not an entirely, I want to make clear that it's not an entirely hopeless story. It's not too pessimistic. It has 2 sides, right? The digital transformation that we're going through has a hopeful aspect and it has a very pessimistic aspect. And ultimately, it will be for you people, so your generation, people of your age, and your level of education, because you are among the education elite of the country, it will be for you to determine what the future is going to look like. And I would like to invite you to really work on this with creativity and with motivation, because you will be the ones who decide what this democracy is going to look like in the future and whether it's still going to exist in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Round of applause, everyone. So, Dr. Hardt, again, thank you so much super fruitful, very rich discussions. It's supposed to be one semester, but we covered everything in just like 1 hour. For the next agenda, I'm going to give it back to the MC. Thank you so much.
Baik, terima kasih kami ucapkan kepada Bapak Dr. Sascha Hardt dan juga Ibu Arum Puspitasari SPD MPD selaku pemateri dan juga moderator kita yang telah mengisi materi kita pada siang hari ini. Mungkin bisa diberikan tepuk tangan yang meriah untuk materi dan juga moderator kita. Hadirin, tibalah di penghujung acara kita pada hari ini, yakni guest lecture dengan tema Digitalization and Constitutional Change, Challenge and Opportunities for Democratic Legitimacy. Namun sebelum kegiatan berakhir, selanjutnya adalah prosesi penyerahan sertifikat kepada pemateri dan juga moderator. Kami mengundang Ibu Kholidah SHM Hum selaku Kepala Program Studi Fakultas Hukum Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang untuk maju ke depan dan sesi foto bersama. Hadirin, inilah penyerahan sertifikat kepada pemateri kita pada siang hari ini. Berikan tepuk tangan yang meriah. Dan yang selanjutnya adalah sesi penyerahan sertifikat kepada moderator kita, yaitu Ibu Arum Puspitasari. Hadirin bisa berikan tepuk tangan sekali lagi untuk penyerahan sertifikat kepada moderator. Kami turut mengundang kepada pemateri dan juga moderator beserta jajaran struktural untuk maju ke depan dan melakukan sesi foto bersama. Untuk sesi foto pertama, Bapak dan Ibu dapat menghadap ke peserta dan melakukan foto bersama dengan sertifikat. Dan diharapkan juga untuk peserta guest lecture untuk berdiri dan berfoto bersama. Diharapkan untuk seluruh peserta guest lecture dapat berdiri dan berfoto bersama. Mungkin foto bisa dimulai dalam hitungan 1, 2, 3. Bisa disiapkan gaya lagi dalam hitungan 1, 2, 3. Bisa disiapkan gaya UMM atau gaya love untuk para peserta. Bisa diangkat dengan tinggi juga tangannya dalam hitungan 1, 2, 3. Baik, bisa diberikan tepuk tangan yang meriah untuk kita semua atas foto yang sangat luar biasa hari ini. Dan untuk Bapak Ibu dipersilahkan untuk kembali ke tempat yang telah disediakan. Sekali lagi kami sampaikan terima kasih kepada Bapak Dr. Sascha Hardt dan juga Ibu Arum Puspitasari SPD MPD selaku pemateri dan juga moderator kita pada siang hari ini. Semoga acara ini bermanfaat bagi kita semua. Rangkaian acara telah kita lalui dan marilah kita membaca hamdalah bersama-sama. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Dan diingatkan kepada seluruh peserta acara guest lecture untuk dapat mengisi link presensi yang telah disiapkan oleh panitia dan nantinya sertifikat peserta akan dikirim ke email masing-masing peserta. Mungkin untuk panitia bisa dibantu untuk menayangkan link barcode di layar. Baik hadirin, sekali lagi terima kasih atas kehadirannya pada acara siang hari ini. Dan saya Amelia Salsabila Natasha selaku MC pamit undur diri. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan untuk seluruh peserta guest lecture pada hari ini, diharapkan untuk tidak meninggalkan ruangan terlebih dahulu.